Good morning. Wanted to do a little seed starting video about the basic seed starting techniques and health, soil, light, everything you need to get your plants started off and looking good. I've been growing my own plants for about 20 years, and some years I've had great success, other years I've had not so good looking plants. I've learned what's worked and what's not worked. I used to always just buy a seed starting soil mixture and stick my seeds in there and try to keep them warm and watered for weeks before something would finally come up. And now, over the last couple of years, I use Ziploc bags. I take a wet paper towel, or damp, I count my seeds out and I fold it up. I put it inside here. I'll put a name, I could put a date and how many I planted with a black marker, and I keep it in the house where it's 80 degrees in a spot, and within 3 days or so I have germination and I can see what seeds are going to come up and what's not. And that has worked really well. It saves a lot of time, so you aren't trying to keep something warm for 3 weeks. Cayenne pepper sometimes takes 3 weeks just to come up, and by using that technique, sometimes it's a week. Sometimes if I'm able to keep it warmer, 85 maybe, they'll come up even quicker. Tomatoes can be like in 3 days, and that saves a lot of time, space, and you don't need to know, well, is it going to germinate? Is it in there? And you're poking around in the soil trying to figure it out. But I always plant everything in these smaller cells when I start off, 72 cell flats. That's where it's 6 cells individual, and that way they can be potted up later, and it'll give the plant a boost of growth. These are ready to be potted into the bigger pot now. I have almost everything done. So they'll start in this. Tomato plants just really seem to benefit and get that boost when you move them up into, this is like a 2-inch pot. And it's not real deep, but they are only in here 3 weeks maybe, and they go from, you know, these have just been done. I don't know if you can see that. Let's see. I don't have any smaller ones. Some have just been done. The peppers are still getting there, but within 3 weeks you have all of this, and it's ready to go outside and get hardened off for a week and then planted in the garden. Now, another thing that's really important with your plants is light. You know, a lot of people try to grow some in their kitchen windowsill, and they will stretch and get real leggy because they aren't getting enough light. Either you need some artificial lights, fluorescent lights, when they're just little until it's warm enough to move them outside into a covered area. But the light is usually the biggest thing. People trying to grow them inside their house in a window usually won't give you thick, sturdy stalks and hardy plants. They'll give you leggy things that could break easily once they go outside in the wind. So you can use your fluorescent lighting over the top, right over the top of them, up until they're a certain size. Once they get too big like this, they're going to need other light, and that would definitely be regular sunlight. We have this, just a 6x8 little greenhouse for starting our stuff. It works great. It's easy to heat. I have a little heater that's behind me, and it keeps it plenty warm and humid for the plants. And then when you do move them outside, you need to harden them off. You don't want to just take these plants right outside and get them burned by the sun. My seed starting mixture here, it's the perlite and peat moss mixture. I'm still trying to break it up. And then I have my bucket here of worm castings that I buy. I buy this stuff in huge totes. I get like a 2,000-pound tote because I use a lot of that stuff. I use it in my garden and all of my seedlings, and I'll use about 3/4 mixture of this over here, and then I'll add about 1/4 of the worm castings just for seed starting. I'll use that in these smaller cells, these 72 cell. These are 6-packs here. This is just peppers, and I started them, like I said, my technique with the Ziploc bag and moist paper towel. And then once they get, these are ready to be moved up into a little bit bigger pots, and I use this size, and this one's only been in here about a week, so it's got plenty more room. When I pot them up, same with the tomato plants, they really seem to take off. They need that moving up to get additional space for their roots. Seems to give them a boost. And at that time, when I move them into the bigger pots, I will use 100% of my worm castings to transplant them. So it'll still have its little core, little cell in the middle, and then the worm castings will fill in all around the outside. Now this one, I got a little baby one hanging on there, is ready to be transplanted in the garden. This is brandywine. You notice the different type of leaves compared to leaves like this. But the color and the health of the plants is so much better. You can see the stalk, and you can plant these in the ground, you know, up until about this point. All these little hairs could be possibly roots that'll take up nutrients. There's no spots on the leaves, there's no yellow leaves. These are its first true leaves. Those will fall off, so those do get yellow, but this is its first leaves. Those are its first true leaves. And in this area is where you'll get your suckers, and you'll want to pinch those off up into the first flower bud, which will, you know, be coming out soon up in there. That one is ready. Another thing that you want to periodically do when you are growing a lot of plants, I did notice I had one that had a disease that I'll discard, and I wanted to show you that. This one right here, something has munched around the base of it, or you know, either a disease or a bug actually munched around it, and you don't want anything like this because that'll keep the nutrients from going up into the plant. So this one definitely needs to be thrown out. And I can look at my other ones, and they all look good. So something just happened to that one. You need to keep an eye out for that when you're buying plants or growing your own plants. Something else to keep in mind is when you buy plants from the store, they have a chemical sprayed on them to keep them stunted until you get them planted. You know, sometimes those plants are shipped in a truck and they're in the dark, and you need to, they're in the dark and they, you know, they're on the shelves, and then you get them and then you don't plant them for a while. You know, normally those things would be turning yellow by now. But when you grow your own, you don't have any of those stunting chemicals, and you need to get these planted, and they will grow much quicker than buying the ones from the store. It's always important also to look for pests, not just diseases. Pests usually, when they're small like this in the greenhouse, are going to be things like aphids. Aphids would usually be hiding up underneath leaves. So you would look underneath here in this area to see any kind of little bugs. And I haven't seen anything. This greenhouse has been pretty much bug-free. So when you finally do get your plants to a certain point, you want to get them used to the sun. You don't want to just take them right outside from your greenhouse, or even if they're under plastic or inside your house, you don't want to take them right outside. You need to harden them off. And what you want to do is get them acclimated to the outside for about a week. And you take them first to a sheltered location. I have them under this large tree, a large shade tree, up away from animals, from getting into them. And this way you keep them like this for a few days, and then you can gradually get them into more sunlight, and then eventually full sun by the end of the week, and that's when you plant them outside. Ideally, you would like to transplant when it's overcast. A really hot day, they're probably going to wilt. You're going to have to water them. If it is a hot sunny day, try to do it later in the day when they won't have so many hours of sunlight to burn them. Here I started some cucumbers also. I started Market More. It's a large cucumber, and I think I did some Boston pickling cukes that's inside. Again, with just starting a seed, I usually just do that more sterile mixture of the peat and perlite with a little bit of worm castings. And when I plant these out in the garden, these are hardening off right now. They're in the shade. Again, if you planted these in the house and they were already up, and then you bring them right outside, they're going to wilt. And if you keep them too wet, you'll see where they fall over right at the base, called wilting off or dampening off, and they get like a fungus and they just fall over. That's from when it's too wet. And these have been outside for about a week, so they should be ready for full sun this afternoon. I didn't see any kind of bugs or diseases, and if you see any kind of spots on the bottom leaves moving up like a blight, you'll need to get that treated right away, because if you put it out in the garden, it's probably going to spread. It's usually in the soil, so I usually don't get it in the pots when I use this more sterile mixture. But you can get it out in the garden from your past years, or too moist of years where it's in the soil, and it'll get up on your bottom leaves and work its way up. You'll want to treat that with copper sulfate. That's a good fungicide, and that'll stop it. You want to do it before it rains, after it rains. Get it in a little sprayer, do it as much as you can. And now your plants are ready to go out in the garden, and I will see you in the next video where we are out in the garden, and I'll show you how to plant doing the no-till method.